Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Deep Cuts Live. If this is your first time watching, please hit that subscribe button or the follow button on whatever platform you're on. Today's guest is someone that I have known about, but I have not had the pleasure of speaking to. So it's another one of those fun interviews where I'm getting to speak and meet this person kind of for the first time, even though I've known of their company for a while. So let's bring on our special guest, Jeremy Casdagli. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm very good. Should I say good morning or good evening?
It's evening here. You can probably tell by the bags under my eyes that it's been a long day.
And I made it longer by trying to be a bit of an arsehole, trying to get it correctly. You know, I'm a bloody technophobe. Antoine's already discovered that. That's why I'm natural with his handmade old style product.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on. When I was speaking to Vlad from at TPE, he mentioned that I told him I had a podcast, and he said, "Oh, you should have Jeremy on." And I was like, "If Jeremy wants to come on, like let's do it."
Absolutely. Try to shut me up. It's very hard.
That's good. That's always a good thing, and what I want from a guest. So, like I said, I know of you because I wrote a story on your company a month or two ago now for a different magazine, and I figure we can rehash some of those questions, but just really want to get to know you because you seem to be, when I posted that you were going to be the guest today, there are several retailers that were excited about it. I know that there are big Casdagli fans, and one of them said that you had the best stories. So, that's always a good thing to hear. Yeah. So tell the listeners and the watchers of this podcast a little bit about you. How did you get your start?
How did I get my start? Well, the start was all really the dreaded C word, Cuba. We're allowed to mention that, or are you going to lock me up the next time I arrive? In fact, Homeland Security used to always, for many years, would put me aside, and I'd disappear from people I was traveling with, entering your lovely country, and I'd be slammed away with the lady with the hijabs and the rest of it. So I really got my start in Cuba in '96 when I first traveled there. I was a bit of a scuba diving bum, and fell into the world of cigars through some encouragement of some people in Jamaica, actually, in the Morgan Harbor Hotel in the Port Royal. And I was diving there with the guys, and they said, the English test match team is turning up to play this strange game we call cricket. I don't know you guys understand it. It's kind of like baseball on Valium. So I remember flying into Havana. I think the plane was mostly full of war tourists, or war journalists, because the Pope John Paul II was due to arrive, the first religious leader to arrive in Cuba since the revolution, actually. And so I said, where the hell am I going to? all these guys discussing Bosnia and stuff like this. And so Havana was a really kind of very interesting place, and very few people. And I fell in with the cigar people there, and started getting involved with Habanos goods. And it was really an extended dive holiday for about 6 months. It was kicked off with. That's the short story. And then I got involved in my own brand, creating something in 1997, I suppose. And I was backwards and forwards from Cuba up until that point for about 6 or 7 months. And then anyway, fell in with Carlos Valdez Mosquera, who started creating some wonderful cigars for me, and which I was dishing out to celebrities in London, certain hotels, and we became known as Bespoke Cigars. That's how it all started.
I was doing some research on you today, and I was listening to some of what you said about the early days of your company and all the issues you had with, like, once you wanted to move to have a presence here in the United States. You got a good crash course in our trademarking copyright process.
United States trademarking generally. I mean, I love your country. I really do. So don't get me wrong there. But, my focus for the first, I suppose, 14, 13 years of my company was not America, because I had been dealing with Cuba. And so by the time I got Cuba behind me, in 2012 and started developing something in Costa Rica and also with Kellner Jr. in Dominican Republic. My markets are already established in Eastern Europe or the Middle East or whatever. So I wasn't looking, I was still a tiny brand. So by the time I actually turned my attention to the United States, and one of the emblems which we used, I mean, there's two things that did make me chuckle. One was that, the emblem we used was our old family emblem that we trademarked in 1885, actually. We have got a long history in trading, mostly stuck in Egypt and Manchester doing cotton as well as Turkish tobacco. So we had the Colossus of Rhodes, right? It was an old symbol. So when we went to trademark that alongside the bespoke cigars, they had the Colossus there, bespoke cigars. We had a charming lawyer. He ended up working for General Cigars, actually, I believe. But he came back and said, Jeremy, we need the original artist's signature for the Colossus of Rhodes and to say it's yours. And bespoke, nobody can trademark it, but you can use it as part of your patent, your symbol. And I said, well, yeah, I think the original artist died 2,000 years ago, old chap. I mean, but the fact that we said, well, that's no good. You're going to have to change it. I said, well, how do you change the Colossus of Rhodes? Well, we put a shield on him and we kind of made him a bit different. And even then, the artist that did that was pretty damn nervous. Said, oh my God, have I got to sign it over to you? But the Colossus is known worldwide and I can't say it's my bit of art. I said, well, America's America. That's what they want. And anyway, we got our ass kicked anyway, as you know, about 3 years later. So it's 2015 went for trademark. We had been sending goods to America prior to that as well, prior for applying for trademark. And anyway, the rest. And so we changed the name due to obviously our little sort of gentleman's agreement with Alan Rubin of Alec Bradley. It was all handled, I think, professionally. And actually he did me a huge favor because, moving Casdagli Cigars underneath the Colossus with the shield was very moving for my family. My father as well, he kind of teared up and said, it's the first time the Casdagli name and the Colossus of Rhodes have been rejoined since 1958, actually. So, and really that most of the stories I tell and as far as our history and heritage do go back to the family. So the fact of calling it Casdagli, it has worked. Bespoke is kind of like an overused name that adopted us more than me adopting it. So thank you, Alan Rubin. Also, thank you, Robert Caldwell and Riste from Yassam Kral, two very different characters. Both of them said, Jeremy, call it Casdagli for Christ's sakes. That's what you should have because that's what it's all about. So there you go.
So when you first decided to create your own cigar brand, did you originally conceive it to be what it is today, or was it just like a project, like a cigar that you wanted to hand out to?
I think you got it right the second time. It never was a plan to make it a big brand. I mean, my money was being made by dealing with actually Habanos goods at that time, which I bought on the domestic market with the thumbs up of then the head of Cuba Tobacco, Oscar Basulto, and the head of the, they're probably getting shot for this, but, and the head of the domestic market. We had great friends of the Cubans there having great fun. So this was a supplement. And it, the fact that, but it was actually the most fun part of it. You understand? I mean, that's where because after you're sort of dealing with Habanos goods and it's a brand that everyone knows, where was the excitement in it? Yeah, it's lovely, cool, elite product. But when you start dealing with something with your own name on it and people know that it's just purely yours, then that's exciting. It does. It became, that's the best, but that was the most fun we had. So we kind of teamed up with some top tennis players. I remember traveling with Andre Medvedev to some of his Grand Slam tournaments, providing he had his cigars with him that I'd create. And also, I mean, we got it to Michael Schumacher and the Ferrari team. That was just doing some cigars. And so, yes, this was great fun. And they were really elite cigars at the time and got me very close to the Saudi royal family, which are still a great market for us today. So, yeah, that was the fun part. And eventually it overtook what we were doing with the Habanos.
What was that transition like, going from just being a, lover and aficionado of cigars to suddenly becoming a brand owner?
Well, well, that's the thing. I couldn't say I was really an aficionado because I was dealing with Cuban stuff. So, that is very, my education started when I really left Cuba stuff behind me and got involved with people like Don Olman Guzman in Costa Rica, and above all, obviously Hendrik Kellner Jr., who taught me that I knew nothing about bloodied cigars. I know a good taste, but blind tasting and guessing what's going to happen. This is where my education started. And as far as it was kind of like a natural progression, really, because I was dealing less and less with Habanos goods as Habanos goods became less and less available. And so I was kind of pushing, and more, I was getting a good income from the Saudis, I guess. Thank you, PK, and the rest of you, and with my Cuban guys there. We still had that going, but eventually that could only be scaled up so much. And what really happened that pushed it, I opened up the market in Belarus, and we actually became the monopoly. I didn't realize that we're the only people importing into Belarus. So to support my brand, we also were importing Arturo Fuente. Davidoff was coming on board, and because they were kind of eager to get involved in this fascinating market, until Lukashenko, you son of a bitch, took my whole company, wrecked the company and everything in 2016. But by that stage, it really gave my natural progression in business a boost, because I'd already become well known as far as, in that part of the world, and also reintroducing stuff to the Middle East. These things are never planned. I always find the world's chaotic, and things just happen, and you think, oh, I'd love to say I planned it. But as long as you put yourself out there and in a position where things could happen, then, it's things do, maybe for the good or bad, it works or doesn't. The success stories you hear about, and the ones that fail, you love to read about. We're in a part of the world now. You got Russia making a nonsense of itself across the border. As soon as a war starts, everything's chaotic. And I think that's very true to brands as well, to how their path goes, who wins, who survives, who knows. You can't tell, but you can only do your best, right? That's what you're doing, and as long as you're enjoying it still.
Yeah, and I guess to backtrack a little bit, like, tell us a little bit about your family, because everybody your website is, and it's great because it goes into such great detail about your family and your background and how they kind of set the stage.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I only really, obviously the name Casdagli, but I kind of grew up on my mother's side of the family when I was 12. My father, the Casdaglis are renowned for famous divorces, and you can read about that online. I grew up in a privileged background, I suppose, going to some of the best schools and some of the worst ones as well, boarding schools where they kick the shit out of you, like Victorian days. The more privileged the family in England back in the 60s and 70s, where it means the tougher the school. So, I kind of thought everybody went through that stuff. And then I kind of drifted away from my father more, and it was with my mother. And it's when I started really getting involved. I went to the best schools, got to the university, is all of that, and just carried on my life. And when I suddenly got involved with cigars, my father perked up and says, "Jeremy, what the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm sort of doing the stuff with Cuba." And he says, I think you should read more about your family history as to why you might be doing this and why the Cubans might be allow you to work this way. And so I obviously understood that they had been big cotton dealers in the past, and we grew up with some interesting family relations, turning up with their sort of Bentleys and stuff, and always crazy stories about Egypt. So I kind of knew a bit of it, but when I sat down and really understood it, it was fascinating. Obviously they got involved with, I was saying, we're about tobacco. We're about premium cigars. I got to leach some history there. And sure enough, we came across some incredible stories that you read about, the story of 1951, where we helped the Cuban business really, and it made headlines. For the embargo, stop the embargo against Cuban cigars. That was my great uncle Emmanuel. And when I spoke to the Cubans about that, initially they said never heard of it, and then eventually, I think it was back in '98, and Pendara said to me, Jeremy, just one thing, you're okay in this country. You'd always be protected here. And he said, by the way, the chap that your uncle did your business with, he was released by Jesse Jackson, got him out as a political prisoner in 1984, I think. So Garcia. So, you know, it was an interesting story of that alone. But yes, it's a fascinating one, and obviously great for marketing for our company. You know, we do take the stories. People love a cigar, love a story, and we got great ones. And we're going to be doing a new cigar about my grandfather's prisoner of war record. You know, and he was like the man that stitched up Hitler. Very famous chap. You'll hear more about that come PCA time, because we're going to launch a cigar to honor him, which, by the way, the Red Cross are very interested in helping with as well. I'm going to be donating money to them because of his experience there. So he has fascinating stories. The Casdagli family itself and its relationship with America makes for a great seminar just by itself. How we fucked you over and you fucked us over and whatever. We were quite a big family at that stage. And you could see the rise and fall of a family as the rise and fall of a British Empire, actually, you'd have to say, because it was all about industrialization and stealing blind from countries that couldn't afford to stop you. Sorry, Egypt. So there you go. And of course, the relics are left, like our big palace in Cairo, which I've been told is going to be renovated. And the Egyptian Minister of Tourism says I'm welcome there, and they to turn up with my Villa Casdagli line of cigars when I next manage to go and take photos by the beautiful place. So, you know, there you go. More marketing coming your way.
Well, I think that's important, though, because I think some of the most successful cigar brands are those that have a really strong story and connection. So you read about your family. It's a different type of history than most people in the cigar industry, but it's still a history, and it gives you
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, and I think that, I mean, there's a lot of bullshit out in that business. I love Robert Caldwell and the way that he tackles it by creating Go East, and he creates a guy that's saved by dolphins and all that thing. Because I mean, there's a lot of send up stuffs there. But as far as, you know, our family history and how it affected my business with cigars was actually very pertinent. And then, of course, you know, you want to put some lovely designs together. So we're actually, you know, picking bits of the old Villa Casdagli Palace, which you can read about on Wikipedia. I mean, this is the thing; these things are all read about Wikipedia. So, you know, because there's a beauty to the place. The Belle Epoque in Egypt. I mean, Egypt was sat as one of the wealthiest countries on the planet in the Belle Epoque. There were something like over 240 palaces built there by wealthy businessmen, and in fact, ours was one of the first built in a place called Garden City, and it's so beautiful. In fact, Lawrence of Arabia said, "God, sitting looking at all of this opulence at Garden City makes one want to turn into a socialist." You know, so it was over the top. So you get beautiful imagery that you can get from this, and you then use that for your artwork and your accessories and whatever, because it's a stunning stuff. You know, so I was very lucky in that way to be able to use that.
So when you decided to, you know, launch this company of your own and have some regular cigar lines, how did you approach like developing a blend? Did you want to blend based on your palate, or did you kind of put it in the hands of the factory you work with?
Yeah, I mean, you know, naturally, how it all started with me to turn this into a proper, I'd say, more grown up brand was with Henry Kellner Jr. And what was my experience up until then? Cuban cigars. Well, in particularly cigars created by this chap, you know, Carlos Valdez Mosquera. You can see a bit about him on our website. And he was an Eau de Monterey specialist. You know, back in the 50s as a kid, he was rolling Eau de Monterey. And so and we know what that's like, right? Sweet and spice and all things nice and mild. And so that's what I grew up with. And that's kind of in the cigar business. And by the way, my first cigar I had when I was 12 years old. You know, you could have them at school in those days. So I think they're trying to give you them so you can make it throw up, so that way you don't get into tobacco. But no, I enjoyed it. So I always liked the Cuban palate, which is full body but mild cigars. So that's what I had to play with. So when I gave that to Hendrik and said, you know, here's my Lancero, and here's my Flying Pig, which we called it then, and here's my Super Bellicoso. And those are the 3 cigars I gave him. And I said, can you get close to that? Because that's how you start with, right? You've got to start from a starting point. And so he created what we know now as our traditional line. I had my first ever blind tasting, which I think was quite an amusing story because it really describes how a blend develops. I mean, I gave him these damn cigars and he smoked them. He said, okay, off your hotel, come back tomorrow. And there I was sitting with 5 Lanceras in front of me, A, B, C, D, and E on the bands. I said, well, what's in these? And he says, this is 2 things here, Jeremy. One, don't talk about Cuba in this country. It's not a good thing. And secondly, if I told you what it was, it wouldn't be a blind tasting, would it? And I bet you haven't done that in Cuba, which is, of course, the truth. I hadn't. So by giving you that story, it's what it's saying. I'm not a blender. I'm not a master blender. The master blender is people like Hendrik Jr. And I can give you a much more description of what I think a master blender is. I didn't blend the cigars, but I knew what I wanted because I know what I like to smoke. And I think that's how a lot of people develop their blends. They're not going to make something they don't like. Well, if they do, it's not going to sell, is it? Because you're not going to have maybe it does sell, but if you don't have your heart behind it, it'll die. Because as the brand owner, it's what you talk about, the enthusiasm, and be that from the biggest to the smallest, and small companies like ours. So, there I was smoking through these first Lancero. Second, I just smoked the first, sort of quarter of it, and then the next one. And I got to the third one, and then it was like a eureka moment for me. It became our Grand Cafe, of course. And I said, this one. He said, what about the other 2? And I said, don't confuse me. This is close to what I expect from a cigar and what my palate is. And there he was like a magician. He holds up number 3. Said, I'm not fisting with you, Jeremy, but at least the taste you like. And this is what I had. And then he broke down the whole cigar for me. And, and like a great teacher, he would get you to answer any questions. He said, okay, Jeremy, so that's the one you want. Yeah. He said, okay, so tell me about a Cuban wrapper leaf. I said, what's a thin and floral? And I have arguments with, these New World cigar guys because it's got 0 to do with the taste. It's pure for beauty and aesthetics. And he says, yes, and you're right. It's kind of as close to a Connecticut sort of leaf, Cuban stuff. And very thin and, lots of cracks on it because I'd put cellophane on it. But anyway, so he said, so there's so this cigar has got Brazilian Cuba. It's a Habanos project. It's very thin and floral. He says, so tell me about your Oil de Monterey. And I said, tell me about the fields. And I said, well, it's a place called San Juan y Martinez. It's very red, there's red soil, iron rich. He says, yeah. And says, what does iron rich give you? I said, give mild cigars. He said, yes, and sweet and spice. And my father had done a project on this, he said, and he's written a cigar journal 2 years prior to that. So in 2010, he'd written this essay about the terroir, matching it to where Oil de Monterey fields were. So he says, you've got one of the hybrids he created and whatever, and that's coming from the same field. It's basically a Oil de Monterey knockoff. I won't go for, but it gives you that essence. Yeah. So I said, okay, right. I'm saying this. And he said, okay, tell me more about Oil de Monterey. I said, well, it's kind of got a creaminess to it. I said, yes. So we got some San Vicente in there, again, Dominican, in the filler tripper, and that's from calcium rich soil. So you've got a creaminess to it, and it's also combined with that binder leaf I was telling you about. He said, this gives you this, but tell me more. Go ahead. He said, so, well, it's got a body. It's got a little bit of strength. It's not like candy. He said, exactly. So you got Nicaraguan Condega Viso, he said, right? And Condega, as we know, is quite organically rich. And he said, so tell me more. I said, well, the body is when you're finished with a damn cigar, or you take it out of the mouth, you have like a little bit of spice. It's like tobacco. He said, great. So you got Pennsylvania broadleaf in there. He said, and that gives you that little bit of zing. There's your Cuban Frankenstein, Jeremy. Now, I told that story, and so that shows just a little bit about it. I had no idea what he was going to give me, but I knew what I liked. And then he said, this is actually what was created. So we had those traditional line cigars, went to Cigar Journal blind tasting, look it up, Cubanesque spice, he said. People say, and if it's not Cuban, of course not. It hasn't got that smell of honey, but it has got a lot of the characteristics, that mildness, the body, it's astonishing what he did. And we, someone to Russia, someone to Prince Khalid in Saudi, they've come back and say, you know, what are these Cuban cigars you come up with? They're kind of interesting. So that's that. And I remember someone telling me after telling us, I told that story to some people in Germany, and there's a guy who looks after Olivar there, and he said, Jeremy, why are you trying to make something Cubanesque from the New World? I said, my dear friend, that's what the market expected of me. I'm here to make money as well. And my markets I was selling it to expected something Cuban or Cubanesque, because I've been doing it for like 15 years by then. So there you go. That gives you an idea of how the brand started, how you get to a blend, I suppose. And it's given you a very good story. I'm no master blender. A master blender is someone like Kellner Jr., who will get that Grand Cafe, and every time he makes a batch, he'll smoke it and make adjustments, because you're dealing with something which inherently is going to be changing as far as the raw material, right? It's either aged tobacco from the same lot, aging more, or it's a different harvest. So what he does is make his fine adjustments to make it consistent year after year after year. And that is a master blender, rather like the magician at Chivas Regal or Coca-Cola, whatever, who got the recipe and makes the adjustments.
You know, it reminds me of one time when I was speaking to Hendrik Kellner, you know, I asked him, because everybody looks at him as being like the master blender.
This is Henke Senior, yeah?
Henke Senior.
Yeah.
I remember I asked him about being a master blender, and he said, you know, in class was sitting there at the interview, and you know, Henke.
Class Peter.
And Henke was like, you know, I don't really consider myself a master blender. He said, because a master blender knows everything, and I don't know everything about tobacco because there's always something new to learn. So, you know, class was sitting there going like, oh my gosh, I never expected my father to say that, you know, that he doesn't consider himself to be a master blender, because it's like, he's like, well, you know, I'm a student.
Yeah, what is it? I mean, I'm sure Hendrik wouldn't either, but you know, I always think like a dad is like the engineer. He's one of the great agricultural engineers, but his son, I mean, Henke says, Jesus, I don't know if my son even wants to make any bloody money, because he's so micromanaging, little junior. And he will be the last person, he's a modest guy, to say, I'm a master blender. But he is, because this is what he does, those little adjustments. I've seen it at work, and how passionate he is about his tobacco, and he knows so bloody much. But you're never going to know everything, right?
No.
But you know, I would say a blend master then, shall we?
You're talking about, obviously, you know, a lot of the people that I speak to have started off maybe in the Dominican Republic and gone international from there. So you have a completely different story, starting off where you did, because, you know, being in London, you know, the London market, for example, they do have Cuban cigars, and
Yeah.
in America don't. So it's like this mystical thing here in America. So did you have any concerns about your blends kind of like translating well into the American market, just because lots of Americans have not had a Cuban cigar?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, we've been at that stage before getting to the American market. I mean, a traditional line, you know, is not like quite like Cuban, but it's got a Cubanesque heritage, I suppose. No Cuban tobacco in it. But by the time we got to America and really started doing it properly in 2015, you know, we'd already kind of like done cut pretty well in some good markets, you know, already. Be it in Belarus or Saudi or Germany, or again, we were scattered into a few countries by Europe by then. And then, of course, you've met Vlad Stoyanov, and he's a sommelier. He's got an incredible palate. And he was always the one that said, you know, well, I was playing in America, you know, before he came along, and we kind of just put it into Big's mansion, just one or two things. But it was like, I still have my elsewhere. And he said, Jeremy, you know, he was a Serbian lad, right? And he was crazy about Cuban stuff. And he tasted our Grand Cafe, and he said, I think he started crowdfunding boxes for his friends there. But he said, I'm going to work in he was at top consultants and top hotels. out in the West Coast, and he says, when you're ready, you tell me, I'm going to build it here. And a lot of it is down to Vlada about the American reception, because he knew how to put over the tastes and where we're coming from very eloquently to the clients and built the market. So the American market and its growth and its reception has got a lot to do with Vlada. It's got a lot to do with the cigar and very little to do with me, to be honest. I've been very much involved with the developments elsewhere, and Vlada's managed to do a great, because he knows how to explain tastes much better than I do. And he had huge faith, and still does, I hope, Vlada, in the brand. And so the reception of it was the fact that he said, I know this is going to work. We'd obviously tested the water in Big's mansion in Chicago, and it went down pretty well there. We liked it, but as far as America wide, he really grew it, and he knew how to explain it. Thank you, Vlada. Good.
And I think you probably came into the U.S. market at a good time, because retail has changed in that they're not just fixated on well-known brands from 4 or 5 different countries now.
Sure.
American cigar smokers now seem to be they don't seem to be overly brand loyal, but they're willing to try new things.
So, yeah, it's an amazing sort of boutique enthusiasm coming from your country. I mean, America always had these exotic brands in anyway. I mean, Europe or the rest of the world was, I grew up, was like 95% Cuban, 5% Davidoff. Even Arturo Fuente and stuff was like pretty exotic. And so America had always been a very competitive market. I think that they're also a very mature one because of it, because they were taking all these different brands from the year of embargo, basically. And the old Cuban families were doing a great job in putting these new ones in, because that's the only, they had a market, one of the biggest market by far in the world, plus Cuban free. And, there's a huge enthusiasm. I've never come across so enthusiastic smokers in many ways of all these boutique brands. And obviously, when I go over there, you do see these like places just absolutely, real cigar nerds way out there. So thank you, America, for all the, support we've got. And just sorry I haven't been able to visit a lot of you guys. And, you get disconnected being out here. 2 years of COVID and 1 year of now Ukrainian mess up, what's going on. It kind of diverts you much more to what's going on around you, and you kind of forget America behind you. But, looking forward to getting back over there and spending some time. And the enthusiasm, the guys which go on the blogs, people like yourself, Antoine, all this is I won't say humbling, because a lot of people use that word, but it's damn exciting. It's great. And the attention we get is wonderful, so thank you for that. I'm sure some people out there hate me, but but yeah, no, it's great to be going there. Americans full of enthusiasm. That's what makes you a great nation.
So seeing that you have this is just in my light here.
Oh, you got one of those little light circles, haven't you?
Yeah, I have to.
I know my daughter's found one of those. She's trying to do TikTok shit on it. Now it's the first time I've seen one in action. I can't get the damn thing to work. It won't surprise you, really.
I have a mini one, and then I have one that kind of decides if it's going to work or not, and then I have a new one that I haven't even opened yet. So I'm all about ring lights. I should buy stock in ring lights.
Yeah, go buy some knockoff ones in Egypt. Didn't do us any good there.
So looking at your company, I mean, you're everywhere now. you're in different continents and countries and cities.
Spread thin. Yeah. Come up to Wehrmacht in 1943, about to hit the duck line, isn't it? Spread thin. We got the supply lines are getting choked. Yeah, sorry, I'm emceeing.
Like your overall goals for your company, like what do you want to accomplish?
Well, basically, it's consolidation now. I mean, the thing is, we are spread thin. Actually, joking aside, I mean, we're getting. One of the things which was really interesting to see was in Halfwheel did this thing, the consensus, and that Casdagli was mentioned in the top 7 brands at the end of last year across 48 different sort of so different media outlets for premium cigars, and that was, well, blimey, we're only making 190,000, I suppose, a year, and this is. As Riste is saying, that character is an interesting man. So we're as boutique as fuck. No, we are Riste. We're totally boutique, but we are opening up markets, are reaching out to us 2 or 3 a month. Seriously, I can count up what's coming, cropping up just from this month. So what I do foresee is that we're trying to build. My target is to build a bit of a legacy of the Casdagli family. I think the history is an interesting one. So we got our Villa Casdagli line of accessories, which we're moving away from the cigars and different sites soon, so we can still use it for marketing, because obviously tobacco is under assault. But we're really looking at some interesting things there. We're creating lifestyle products as well, and may get even back into the rag trade a little bit. But so that's what I foresee as far as the future is concerned. Yes, consolidation. We can see no problem of us being in every continent on the planet, because we pretty much are at the moment. It's rare to get a brand run by an Englishman, and in South America, for instance, and Brazil has taken us on board, and Venezuela's reaching out. Jesus, God, I love Venezuela, right? So what I foresee in the immediate future is that, joking aside about the story about the tragic German army, thank God they went, but it's to consolidate our supply lines, and to we're still a very a young company in many ways. I'm talking about, yes, 25 years in, but only since 2012 in this what they call the New World product. So we need to, I am looking at potential investment in a factory in the future, in the near future. I've just got to find the right one, and we'll see what happens there, because I need to consolidate us to go for the next 10 to 15 years. Well, I'm looking 15 years ahead now, as to because we're going to get more demand. And one of the things which is interesting about companies based outside of America is, of course, the Cuban business is collapsing around us. There's only, I think, 50 million cigars made last year in Cuba, premium cigars. Previous to that was 70 million. In the 1999, 2000, it was almost 100 million. So that demand for places like the Middle East and the Far East, like Singapore, they're reaching out to me, and a lot of them are Habanos dealers, to be honest. They had the Habanos distributors, and they know of me because of those old days. Some of them, they know our cigars have been written up. Some of them, like, he started in Cuba, and then it developed from that Cubanesque taste to now other more crazy things. I mean, the Villa Casdagli line has got nothing to do with Cuba, but everything to do with Peru, one of my favorite tobaccos I'm smoking now. So I see just demand increasing for companies like ours, sat outside of the United States, where most New World cigars go to America, about 85% of them. Because I'm out here, I've got all these other countries, exotic countries, coming on board, and I've got to look after them.
When I was doing my research on you and listening to some of your other interviews, you were talking in one interview about how in some countries you have plain packaging that you have to compete with, and how right here in America would look at plain packaging and think it's a bad thing. But I think if I took it right, you're saying that it turned out to be a good thing for you all.
Yeah, I mean, we take a little. I mean, let's go way back to when cigars are just fighting for their pure, for the brands were creating themselves. There was no packaging at all, or hardly any packaging at all at the beginning, was it? In the late 1800s. And yes, what we found as a control experiment would be in Ireland, where we were selling for wonderful outlets, it still are, called Decent Cigar, Grafton Street. And we were mostly known for doing Cuban cigars there. And then in 2012, 2013, we just were selling white goods coming from Costa Rica. We have made some quite Cuban-esque stuff there, so that suited their palate. We could get hold of some strange leaf. And so we were selling maybe 1,000 to 2,000 cigars a month in Grafton Street. Now, when plain packaging came on board, Guy Hancock, rest in peace, Guy, he passed away this year, but he said, Jeremy, now's your time, because your cigars have got pure quality. They're now going to sit next to the Bolivar, Bellicoso, whatever. They're all going to look the same, marketing stuff, and people will be more inclined to the flavor. And the sizes, they'll go for a size. Oh, I want to have a, like this Super Bellicoso, for instance, or a Robusto or a Corona Gorda. And then you got those, oh, well, let's try this one, because they're more accessible as against the stuff which, have come with big Cuban Habano stuff everywhere. Now they're all sitting with just a simple band on it. Our supply, our demand went from 1,000 to about 3,000 cigars a month sale, because it's pure quality, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys don't even have warning labels on your boxes, and long may that go on. Actually, don't feel afraid if the consumers are now not going to be, if they do go plain packaging like in Ireland or Australia, they're not bombarded with just marketing stuff. But it's just pure quality they've got to go for. You understand? I mean, that's what the guy, and also you've got to have a guy in the store he's qualified, but he's going to ask your taste, whatever. But you're kind of more inclined to go for quality over marketing. And so, I'm looking at that. Like in Saudi Arabia, for instance, they don't like cigars with bands on them, period. They're purists. And that is the cool thing. Yeah. So they're a bit more open to exotic cigars coming there, strangely enough.
Do you
think,
and
then the marketing, we're looking at it for our, the stuff you wear and your silk squares and all that stuff. That was still a wonderful thing to have, and to have that bit of the Casdagli legacy and those patterns which were developed back in those days. But then the actual cigars themselves just stand out for quality. They live and die by it in those markets. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. And when you kind of look at that situation, do you think it's more that's maybe some of the manufacturers are concerned about plain packaging, because then everybody has to compete in terms of quality?
Well, I think that if your quality products and the thing that people are concerned about, the big companies and small ones, is just the annoying of having to create another packaging, because you've got all the beautiful stuff, and then you've got to create these sort of olive brown boxes. It's the inconvenience. But I think that if it, look at the cigarette companies, for instance. I mean, they're plain packaging. They covered all the stuff up. They're still selling their product. People are still going to have their, the tobacco, their premium tobacco. It's a hobby, and it's a growing business with all the shit they throw at you, with the taxes and the warnings and where you can and cannot smoke. Still grows. I think it's a concern because of the more of a concern for the box companies and printing companies, I think, than for the tobacco. It would save me a lot of money not having to spend a lot on these wonderful boxes. The main thing is, I think it's really important with that happening potentially, is getting your market loyalty now. This is where you're carving out the market for yourself, like we did in Ireland. People had got used to that taste and that flavor. But it just say, right, now we got all of, all these cigars look the same, but we know that tastes good, so I'm less likely to be influenced by the marketing, as I was saying, and they just go more for the taste. So, it would have a Casdagli name on it, of course, and they know that's a Casdagli cigar, even if it's just plain print on a fax type paper, ring, or on the box. I mean, my cigars in Ireland sit without anything on them. So, but they just know what to go for. So there's that Casdagli one. Okay, we go for that. So there, yeah.
I think that's really interesting, because, you always read about plain packaging, and you brought up the good point that some of the cigarette, people, they don't have half the marketing tools that a cigar company does. And yet, I mean, maybe their sales aren't what they used to be, but they're still there.
A Frenchman wants his Gauloise, and that's their right, and so, as an example, And Philip Morris in Turkey is a little bit stronger than Philip Morris elsewhere. They have their little different recipes, and people like it. I mean, I'm not into cigarette smoking, but it's just an example.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, imagine if all your cheeses had all the packaging gone, they just go for flavors. Which one looks a bit more runny, I'll go for that. And then so I do understand where some purists as well on the other side said, God, we don't want to lose those wonderful names on the boxes and all that stuff. And I understand that bit of history, but as long as Arturo Fuente will always be an Arturo Fuente. Davidoff will be a Davidoff. Cuban's going to be a Cuban. And that will stay as long as you stick with the quality. But there's a lot of cigars out there which are purely on marketing, and that's over quality. Some of them, it's marketing over quality, and they will suffer, I think.
And
Mention their names, but
on the other side of that, though, your company has very, I would say, distinctive design qualities that I know, like on your website, and I think in other interviews you say your wife helped.
Yes. Yeah, she helped me get this bloody computer going properly. She was shocked when I woke up. Poor thing has got COVID now as well. So she's no. She certainly did. I mean, when I met Trina, I mean, she was working for Saatchi and Saatchi at the time, and she'd always been in marketing. I mean, the age of 23, 24, she was doing marketing for the airport of Tallinn. So she was the one. I mean, I've never been a marketing guy. I've been more of a salesman, I suppose. But I remember she was this wonderful. I won't tip it sideways because it'll be. But you got a bit of a pattern here. You can see where my ash is. You got the pattern behind it. That sort of like wallpaper pattern. Well, if you've seen it, she was the one that observed it. Look, these pictures of the old Casdagli Palace and that wallpaper. The Egyptian Times had sent us some colored pictures. And he said, why don't you use that? I said, well, okay, good example. And she's now head of our marketing. And we have the Adelina Vaher also dealing with our social media. And she's an international model. So she kind of knows how to build that bit of it and to make the stories or whatever, as well as Trina doing it. So yeah, I was just very lucky through marriage having a marketing expert. I mean, she was looking after Vodafone, a company called Elisa. She was they're doing the head of their marketing, which is one of the main telecoms companies in Estonia and the Baltics. So she knows her stuff and she's great with it. So yeah, and I then have to get involved with social media. She does all of that because it's beyond me. I mean, I love it. I do see all the comments and all the things, but I don't know how to interact with it. So.
Well, you said that sales is more your thing. So what have you learned about sales as it relates to a luxury product like Casdagli Cigars?
Well, it's obvious. The thing is, there's three main things for sales in a luxury product. Okay. Got to have a great backstory. Okay. It's got to have a story behind it. So let's just take Cartier, right? It's the tank watch. Why is that square, that design classic is that square watch face called the tank, named after the tank of World War I. They say, oh, people, I didn't know that. Oh, yes, it does look like a tank from above, hence called a tank. So it's a great story in Cartier. We know there's the story of the family if people are into watches. So you've got that. You've got provenance. So, for instance, for our cigars, yeah, we try to, like when I was dealing with the Cuban stuff we were making, that's Carlos Valdez Mosquera. He was like one of the top torcedores in Cuba. There were 6 of them, like the Buena Vista Social Club of Cuban, of Cuban cigar rollers. So, and then there's Hendrik Kellner Jr., his name, so provenance, the backstory, we have the family stories, all these wonderful stories, which, happen to be true ones and either reported. And then it's got to be good. It's got to be functional. So that Cartier watch has to work. Okay, so it's got to taste good. So as long as you've got a product that's got a great backstory that I can grip and throw people with, or bore the shit out of them, whichever way. But then, and you've got a provenance of the product. People always say, Jeremy, why do you talk about the Torcedores or Kellner Jr.? Your brand is what it's all about. It's not about these guys. And no, these guys are creating the cigar. I'm always saying it, like Don Allman Guzman, or you know, IGM making Our Daughters of the Wind. We put those factories as partners. We don't hide away and say, oh, this is our factory. No, because what the hell, I haven't got a history of having factories of cigars. So you've got to have provenance, a good backstory, and it's got to be good. And once you've got those things, it can sell, because you know you're not conning anybody, and you know you sold yourself on the product. And then my marketing team makes it look good. That's something different.
I always think that that's interesting, because I think there's everybody has their own different approach to sales. So
yeah, I'm sure.
What
I like going the easy way. I like this product to do all the work for me, and then I just sort of like sit in the background, saying, have a look at this, you know.
So what's your advice to other kind of entrepreneurs out there who might have an idea for a business, and let's say it's a luxury brand of some sort? It might not be cigars, but it might be
sure.
It might be watches. It might be a luxury, you know, some type of luxury clothing. What's your advice for them to get started? Like how?
Yeah, I suppose persistence, being pig-headed. I mean, I've been through some huge knocks in my business, but I think if you find something you're good at and you enjoy, it's a rare thing, by the way, to do it. I'm very lucky to do that. I mean, you've asked me a question which is quite fascinating, because, you know, I have, you know, before this war in Ukraine broke out, I was selected by the Estonian Business School to actually go to, which is like a big international business thing, to go to speak to Ukrainian war veterans, the ones who've been fighting in the Donbass. I was meant to be going actually in April. This was all put together last year. They selected me because they said you can connect with the veterans, these young guys trying to start businesses, have had war shock, or, you know, the delayed stress syndrome and all that stuff the battlefield gives you. And, you know, you've got the stories of how you've been knocked down 3 or 4 times, and I have, by, you know, people trying to, you know, be it the name change, that's one thing, but some of the other stories of Cuba and distributors trying to gang up on me and use customs and excise against me and all sorts of things. But I found this is something I could do well. So if you're a guy that's creating cloth, or if you're a guy that's doing your IT and you're a nerd on it and you love it, or you're a coffee nerd and I want to get into that, then it's got to be persistence. You know, I have been at this for 25 years and I've enjoyed it. Yes, some of it's been hard work, but I've enjoyed it. So as long as you find something you enjoy or love, then it's persistence. And every time you get buggered up, which will happen, and by the way, that makes you stronger. You know, it's staying with it. You know, most companies go down in the first 2 years. Any small company, I think there's something like a 70-80% failure rate. But it's those that get up and do it again and again and again. Be it even an Abramovich who was selling, you know, toys at fairs at some stage, and then he hit the spot, didn't he, with Baryshnikov, and made him a wealthy man with Putin, whatever. I'm not saying he's a good man, but he's a persistent man. Yeah. So persistence was something that you love. And if you don't enjoy doing it, stop, try something else.
What's your definition of success?
Well, if you're waking up every day and you feel that if you've retired, you would do this anyway, I suppose that's the thing. I'm to be totally at peace. I mean, I love getting up in the morning early. I don't, you know, some people have put monetary. Of course, money is important, because obviously you wouldn't do some of the other things you want to enjoy. It doesn't have to be. Some people grade it. Everyone has their own version of it. So it's not my version of it is to be waking up the freedom to do what I wish, and find out I'm waking up early and going to work because I want to do it. And, you know, creating a nice environment around you. Absolutely. So, yeah.
What's something that you've had to learn in order to become better at what you do?
To be thick-skinned, and to not be afraid of taking chances. When I mean, you know, when I started working with Cuba, you can imagine this was like the really wild west, working with that country. Then you had the pressure of people trying to screw your business up, you know, to stop you doing what you're doing. And so, you know, I had a head start of it because, to be honest, and I'm not just boasting, at the age of 8, I was sent to prep school. And that means you're away from your family for most of the year. You sink or you swim in those places. Very, very hard. Corporal punishment, military school, basically. So I was pretty much sustained. I can self-reliant. Because if you're going to start your own business, and in the premium cigar world, it's actually a really crowded, especially in America, is you've got to have that resilience and self-confidence. That means that when you are kicked down, then you're fine. I mean, I've had everything ripped away. I mean, before the cigar business, I had a business in Africa. The whole lot went when Kenneth Kinder turned into a Democrat. I ended up in the streets of London. My family wouldn't speak to me because they were horrified of what I might be doing in Africa. The only thing I had was my signet ring. Pawn that so I could get back to my family for Christmas. These aren't sob stories because I was never unhappy. And, I've been to a boarding school. I'll tell you just a little anecdote, okay, to tell you where I'm coming from. And that is that in the 1970s, there was a civil war going on for 8 years in Beirut. There were 4 or 5 Brits which were kidnapped there. A very famous one, Terry Waite. They just disappeared. And when that civil war ended, these people hadn't been seen for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And they came out one by one. And I've forgotten the guy's name, but he was a journalist. He arrived at Norfolk and he walked out and people said, "What was it like?" And he said, "Well, I went to an English public school, as we call them." It says, "I can tell you where I've just come from. The food was better, the company was better, and the weather was better. So I was quite okay." So there's my answer to you. To be resilient, I luckily had it beaten into me.
And the final question for today, after that great anecdote, is what have you learned about yourself since you've launched Casdagli Cigars?
Casdagli Cigars. Well, I suppose I've learned that I enjoy being with people more than I did. I mean, because of course you're with like-minded individuals. So one of the things that, I was quite insular my own self. I wasn't a great social person. I was good at sales, but then I had nothing better than just go home and afterwards. And being in the cigar community, if you can get into it, it's wonderful because the people you're talking to your brand about, selling your cigars to, in a way, are people doing this for their hobbies? They're doing it for the love of it. And there's nothing better than traveling around and meeting all these people that just like you, whether they smoke your cigars or not, you have a great discussion about it. And it's all very things. So I've learned that I'm a much more social character than I used to be, if that's an answer. I've kind of learned, what happiness is. Actually settled down eventually, I've got a wonderful family around me. So, but the basic character that you've developed going in, I think stays with you. I've never forgot when my father was doing a speech at my grandfather's funeral, and my girlfriend at the time, Christina was her name, jazz singer, said, "Look at your dad. He's just that little boy that you told me about just right now. You look at him, he hasn't really changed, Jeremy. You've got to think about that about your father. Go and give him a hug because he's the same kid, same guy, and so you learn about that about yourself as well. I think the inner character you have develops in whatever line you do. I mean, you've got the environmental and experiences, but your basic character is there. So I actually have a picture here that was done of it's actually upstairs, that was done of me when I was an 8-year-old, and it sits in my bedroom. There's an artist in Cornwall called Siegel, and he did a pretty good rendition of me as an 8-year-old brat. And I wake up every morning and look at that. I said, "You're still that same little sod." So yeah, I hope that's an answer to the question. That's the first time I can answer that. So thanks for that.
I think that's a great note to end on, that, you don't, the essence of who you are, your exterior might change and age, but in the essence, you're at the core.
The same guy. You're the same little guy that's grown up and things, and some people try to hide that, whatever, this tough guy. But I think ultimately, when the chips are down, you're that same chap, looking to learn, being inquisitive or not. It depends who you are, and that's not bad either. Some people are very content to sit and do their TikToks and the rest of it. And finishing, being as somebody that, I don't know, we call them a baby boomer or whatever. And I was always snaring at these my kids looking at TikTok and their iPad and stuck on screens. And then I look over at what's going on in Ukraine, and you see these young TikTokers, millennials, picking up Kalashnikovs and protecting their country. That's impressive for me. I don't think I'll ever take piss out of millennials again, because that's extraordinary what they're doing. And also the poor young Russian boys, which are, the conscripts, which are dying in their thousands. And, they aren't the peasant tough guys that used to be attacking in those last wars. These kids are grown up with Instagram and everything else, and they're forced into these situations as well by one real swine who's ruining all their lives. So let's finish on that. Think of the millennials. They're not as light and wet as I thought they were. they got fight in them.
Well, for those people who are not watching this and they're listening to this, could you just tell them what website they need to go to find out more information about Casdagli? And
yeah, sure. www.casdaglicigars.com. And we're on Instagram and all that stuff as well. I suppose, and we got Villa Casdagli collection as well. It's like coming up. So when we're playing packaging across the world, you can see that. So, thanks for watching this. This has been wonderful. I could go on forever. I'm smoking my little Pura Vita. By the way, Peruvian tobacco is something we haven't spoken about next time. But
yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to be heading to Germany, which is going to be great fun, because I tell them all about the new project coming up. My grandfather was a guest of theirs for 4 years. They're wonderful people, actually. Really great. Can't wait to be there tomorrow.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, and I would love to have you back later on in the year. Maybe we can get Vlad to come on as well at the same time.
Yeah, he's good. He'll tell you how I cheated him out of some Cuban cigars when I first met him. He likes that story. And you'll see us both together at PCA if you manage to make it over there. And I'll be doing a little trip around as well. And I'll be also coming back in September to tour around a bit of the States as well. So I'm going to make it twice this year, and can't wait to see you guys out there and take a piss out of a Brit.
Well, come on, we're all waiting.
Okay, I hope so. I'm about to put you all off. But yeah, I'll be there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jeremy, and thank everybody for watching and listening to this, whether it's live or in playback mode. We do shows at least one a week, usually. But for the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 shows, and we have 2 shows next week. We have Brian Dezen from Privada Cigar Club on Tuesday, and then we have who else? And then
we got to say hi to Brian for me. I think he was a bit pissed off about brands. That I said, Brian, it's nothing personal. We just don't have the product. But I think you're quite a character, isn't he? So
he is. So we're looking forward to that. And then we have Pedro Gomez from Drew Estate next Thursday, and this Thursday we have Jonas Santana from Blackbird. So you have 3 shows coming up for the next week and a half. So there's plenty more deep cuts. And for anybody who wants to watch some of the past 73 episodes, this is number 74. You can see that on deepcutslive.com. And like I said, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, make sure you hit the like button or the follow button just to be notified anytime we have new content. So again, we're going to let Jeremy go so he can get ready for his trip.
Yes.
We're going to sign off for tonight, and just want to thank everyone again, and thank our guests for spending a good hour and 4 minutes with us.
Yeah. Took me 10 minutes to figure out how to work the computer, didn't it? So
it worked out, so we're all good.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Antoine. And you're going to cut me off, I suppose. Now, is that what happens? You sort of like guillotine drop.
Well, I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, and you and I will still be connected, but everybody else will see a black screen. So
good.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Inshallah. See you soon.